video, don't forget to smash the like button and share this video with as many people as you can. And if you have not subscribed to my channel yet, kindly do it so that you don't miss any of my videos. So without any delay, let's get started. And today, this is the Ajax part 1. There will be two parts, part 1 and part 2. This is part 1 and we will get to know a lot about Ajax. So let's get started. Dab! Yeah. Okay. So Ajax introduction. So we are gonna do these 4 chapters: intro, XML HTTP request object, Ajax request, and Ajax response. So first, Ajax introduction. Ajax is a developer's dream. So Ajax is basically a developer's dream because you can read data from a web server. You can read data from a web server using Ajax after the page has loaded. Update a web page without reloading the page. You can update the web page without reloading the page, and you can send data to a web browser in the background. So you can send data to a web browser in the background also. This is so cool. Ajax is basically a developer's dream because every developer wants to make social networking sites, and using Ajax you can. In Ajax there is everything, database and all. Okay, that you need to create a social networking site. Okay, so an Ajax example. This is an Ajax example. So let Ajax change this text and change content. So Ajax, using Ajax we have changed this text. Okay, so let's try it. Let's see its code. So what is basically happening in the HTML body? First we are creating a div and its ID is demo. In that we are giving a h2, and in that we are printing it's in HTML is the XML HTTP request object. So here it is. Okay, then we are creating a button. Its type is button, and when it is clicked, load doc would be called, and its contents in it is change content. So here it is. Now let's see the load doc. First of all, I will just move this up over here, up here. This would make more sense. Okay, so in the load doc function, what we are doing, we are first creating a XML HTTP request object. Okay, then using its open method, using the in that we have to pass 3 arguments. One is the type in which we want to open, the second one is the link, and the third one is that it should be async or synchronous. Okay, so we have to open this ajaxinfo.txt. We are using the get method. Its link is ajaxinfo.txt, and asynchronous is true. Okay, so using the open method, we are opening this ajaxinfo.txt file using the get method and asynchronously. Then we are sending the request to our web server. Okay, the web server is hearing for the request, and when it hears it, so it will now create a response text. So okay, so we have a x. Now what we are doing, when we are doing x http dot on ready state change equals to function. So when the ready state would be changed, so the ready state, when it would be changed, it would go in this function. This is a callback, so it would go in this function, and it would do, so like it would check that if this dot ready state equals to 4 and this dot status equals to 200. That means if there is success, then what it would do, it would do it would access demo, and it will set it in a HTML to response text. Response text is a default property that the server will make a response text and give it to the browser. Okay, so the response text is a default property. Okay, so this was all the response text. That's why we are setting demo to it's in HTML to this, so it is being changed. Okay, so the response text was this, that's why this is coming. Okay, so now this example is properly explained. Okay, so the HTML page contains a div section with a button, okay, and a button. Okay, a div section with a button. The div section is used to display information from a server. So the div section is used to display information from a server. The button calls a function if it is clicked. Okay, the function requests data from a web server and displays it. So this function, the function requests data from the web server and displays it. This. Okay, so I'll just explain you once again. It is creating an XML HTTP request. Then it is opening the ajexinfo.txt file using the get method and the asynchronous is true. Then it is sending the request. Okay, so it is sending the request. Okay, so in server, the server listens for the request and it gets a request, so it sees whatever contents are should it give as a response text to the browser back again. So it when it is ready to give, it does some processing and all, and then it gives it back to the browser. It checks that when the ready state is changing. So ready state is a default property, so it checks that if it is changed, then it would go in this function and it would check that if ready state's value is 4 and this dot status is 200, that means if it is successful, then it would bring demo and its in HTML would be set to response text that the server has given us. Okay, it fills all the contents in response text and then it gives it back to us. Okay, so what is basically Ajax? Ajax is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Ajax is not a programming language. So it is not a programming language. Ajax just uses a combination of a browser built-in XML HTTP request object to request data from a web server and JavaScript and HTML DOM to display or use the data. So Ajax uses the combination of the built-in XML HTTP request object and the JavaScript and HTML DOM. Okay. So Ajax is a misleading name. Okay, so Ajax is a misleading name. Ajax applications might use XML to transport data, but it is equally common to transport data as plain text or JSON text. So like here we were transporting data in plain text. Okay, so it is common to transfer it in plain text, so it is typa misleading. Okay. So Ajax allows web pages to be updated asynchronously. So Ajax allows web pages to be updated asynchronously by exchanging a data with a web server. So Ajax allows web pages to be updated asynchronously by exchanging data with a web server behind the scenes. This means that it is possible to update parts of a web page without reloading the whole page. So this means that it is possible to update parts of a web page without reloading the whole page. So now we are on a diagram that how Ajax works. So first there is a browser end, there is a server end, and then there is a browser end. So first the browser, in the browser an event occurs. Then after when it occurs, it creates an XML HTTP request object. Then it sends the HTTP request. The request goes to the internet and the internet gives it to the server. The server processes the HTTP request, then it creates a response and sends the data back to the browser. So it goes to the internet and then it is back to the browser. The browser processes the return data using JavaScript. So it processes the return data using JavaScript and then it would update the page content. So an event occurs in a web page. Okay, an XML HTTP request object is created by JavaScript. Then the XML HTTP request object sends a request to a web server. The server processes the request, then the server sends a response back to the web page. The response is read by JavaScript, and a proper action like page update is performed by JavaScript. Okay, so I hope you all understood this, and now we are on the next chapter. So let's have 15 seconds of break. Okay. Okay, so it is break time, guys. I hope you all guys are understanding perfectly. If you don't, just like go back and listen it back once again. If you still don't understand, ask it in the comments. I would be very glad to answer your questions. Okay. So let's see. The AJAX, the XML HTTP request object. So the keystone of AJAX is the XML HTTP request object. So the keystone of AJAX is the XML HTTP request object. Okay, so let's study the XML HTTP request object deeply. Yeah, so the XML HTTP request object. All modern browsers support the XML HTTP request object. So all the modern browsers support the XML HTTP request object. The XML HTTP request object can be used to exchange data with a web server behind the scenes. So the XML HTTP request object can be used to exchange data with a web server behind the scenes. This means that it is possible to update parts of a web page without reloading the whole page. So this means that it is possible to update parts of a web page without reloading the whole page. Okay, so how can you create an XML HTTP request object? All modern browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer 7 Plus, Edge, Safari, and Opera have a built-in XML HTTP request object. Okay, so the syntax for creating an XML HTTP request object is as follows. Give the variable, then you do new XML HTTP request. An example is variable XHTTP is equal to new XML HTTP request, and it goes to the same example. Okay, so access across domains. So now we are on access across domains. So let's see what is this. So for security reasons, modern browsers do not allow access across domains. So for security reasons, the modern browsers do not allow access across domains. So let's see what this means. This means that both the web page and the XML file it tries to load must be located on the same server. So this means that both the web page and the XML file it tried to load must be located on the same server. So they must be located on the same server, so like it does not allow access across domains. Okay, and it is for security reasons. Okay, so the examples on W3 schools all open XML files located on the W3 schools domain. So the examples on W3 schools all open XML files located on the W3 schools domain. Okay, so if you want to use the example above on one of your own web pages, the XML files you load must be located on your own server. So the XML files you load should be located on your own server, or they will not be loaded. Okay. Okay, so now we are on modern browsers and Fetch API. So modern browsers can use Fetch API instead of XML HTTP request object. So the modern browsers can also use fetch API instead of XML HTTP request object. The fetch API interface allows web browsers to make HTTP requests to web servers. So the fetch API interface allows web browsers to make HTTP requests to web pages. Okay, not to web pages, to web servers. Okay, so if you use XML HTTP or request object, fetch can do the same in a simpler way. So the fetch API can do the same in a simpler way, but we are not learning how to use fetch API. Okay, but it could do the same work as XML HTTP request object in a simpler way. Now let's see old browsers, Internet Explorer 5 and Internet Explorer 6. Old versions of Internet Explorer 5 and 6 are use an ActiveX object instead of XML HTTP request object. So these are old browsers, Internet Explorer 5 and Internet Explorer 6. So if you want your the XML HTTP request object will not work on these browsers. So you would have to use ActiveX object instead of the XML HTTP request object on in these browsers. Okay, so the syntax of it is the variable new ActiveX object and then you give Microsoft.xml HTTP in it. Okay, so this is the syntax. So to handle Internet Explorer 5 and Internet Explorer 6, check if the browser supports XML HTTP request object or else create an ActiveX object. Okay, so it would do if window.xml HTTP request. So if window.xml HTTP request is supported, then the code for modern browsers will come here. Else, the code for the old internet browsers, Internet Explorer browsers will come here. So like new ActiveX object, Microsoft.xml HTTP. So let's check what is the value of XML HTTP request right now. Let's alert this. So let's see what is it. Change content. So function XML HTTP request. So what is happening basically? You see, this if statement is not getting an empty string. Okay, if XML HTTP request is not supported, it would get an empty string, or I don't know, it may get null or undefined also. Okay, and then it would go in else. But right now in this, it is not getting an empty string. It is getting this native code thingy. Okay, this native code thingy, and this is not empty. And not every full string is true. Its value is true. So if you check the boolean value is this the spelling? I'll just go to Google and just type it, boolean. Yeah, this is the spelling, boolean. In this, if I pass empty string, then see, false. So empty string is false. But if I give some content in this, any blah blah blah, then it is true. Okay, so a empty string is false, but a full string is true. Filled string is true. Okay, so if empty string comes in this, or like null or undefined comes, then it goes idea. Let me see, if I give null, then it uses this, or it uses this ActiveX. If I do alert something gibberish. Okay, so null is not using this XML HTTP. Okay, so if I give undefined, then okay, so undefined is also if so if there is null or undefined or like empty string over here, then it goes in the else. Okay, so now we are on the XML HTTP request object methods. So the one is new XML HTTP request, and this creates a new XML HTTP request object. Then we have a abort method. Okay, it cancels the current request. So it cancels the current request. Okay, so I can't show you abort because I don't know the syntax of it, and all these other methods we will see in these two in the further chapters. So another method is get all response headers, and it returns header information. So this get all response headers, it returns header information. Okay, get response header returns specific header information. Okay, so you will get to know a lot about these methods more in the further chapters. Okay, then we have an open method that we have used a number of times. In that we have to pass a method, a URL, and async, true or false, and these user and password are optional. Okay, so the method that you want to use, get or post, URL that you want to use, it is the file location, and async you have to give true. If you give true, that means it would use asynchronous, else it would use synchronous. So let's see it. This open method specifies the request. Okay, the method property is the request type, get or post. Okay, the URL is the file location. The async is true, that means asynchronous, or you give false, that is synchronous. User is an optional username, and password is also an optional password. Okay, then we have a send method. It sends the request to the server, used for get requests. So this send method is used for get request, and it sends the request to the server. Then send, and you give a string to it. It sends the request. This also sends the request to the server, and but the giving string in it is used for post requests. Okay, and then we have a set request header. It adds a label value pair to the header to be sent. Okay, so we will see more, all of these methods instead of abort in further chapters. Now we have the properties. These were all the XML HTTP request object methods. But now let's see the properties of XML HTTP request object. So one of the properties on ready state change. So it defines a function to be called when the ready state property changes. So this on ready state change defines a function to be called when the ready state property changes. So what is the ready state? It holds the status of the XML HTTP request. So it holds the status of the XML HTTP request. Zero status means request not initialized. So 0 means that request is not initialized. One means server connection established. So 1 means server connection is established. So the connection with the server is established. Then 2 means that the request on the server is received. Okay. 3 means that the server is processing the request. And finally 4 means that the request is finished and the response is ready. So the request is finished and the response is ready. Okay, so that's why in our load doc program, if you remember, we give that if ready state equals to 4 and status is equal to 200, then uh, then then only it would show the response text. So 4 means that the request is finished and the response is ready. Okay, so we want that when the response is ready, then only we want to show the response text. That's why we gave 4. Now let's see the response text property. It returns the response data as a string. So this returns a response, returns the response data as a string. Response XML returns the response data as XML data. Response text returns it as a string, but response XML returns the response data as XML data. Okay. Now the status property, it returns the status number of a request. Like 200 is okay, that means successful. 403 is forbidden. Okay. 404 is not found. Okay, and for a complete list, go to HTTP messages reference. So there are like lots and lots of messages. You can't remember all of those. Okay, so these are one of the main. 200 is okay, 403 is forbidden, and 404 is not found. Okay, so that's why 200 means successful. So if you remember in that load doc, we did if ready state equals to 4 and status is 200. Status 200 is okay, so it checks that if it is successful, then. And status text returns the status text example okay or not. Okay, so we will just take a short break before doing this chapter. Oh, feels good, man. Yay. Oh, I was spinning too fast. Let's take a break like this. Okay. Is there water? Yes, there is. I'll just have a sip of water, guys. Ah, I just had a sip of water. Now I'm ready to continue. Okay, Ajax, send a request to a server. So let's see how to send a request to a server. So now we will learn about the post method. Till now we were just doing the get method. So the XML HTTP request object is used to exchange data with a server. So this XML HTTP request object is used to exchange data with a web server. So send a request to a server. So to send a request to a server, we use the open and send methods of the XML HTTP request object. So like we use the open like this. So we give the method, we are using get method, and then we give the file URL. So ajaxinfo.txt is the file URL and asynchronous is true. So and then we are doing xhttp.send. Then so this send is sending the request to the server. So the method open, we have just read this that it specifies the type of a request. Method is the type of request, get or post. URL is the server file location. Async is true, asynchronous, or false synchronous. Okay, send sends the request to the server, used for get, and send, and if you give a string in it, it sends the request to the server used for post method. Now let's see get or post. Which should you use? Get is simpler and faster than post and can be used in most cases. So get is simpler and faster than post and can be used in most cases. However, always use post requests when always use post requests when a cached file is not an option. When an cached file is not an option. So like update a file or database on the server. So when a cached file is not an option, use the post method. When you are sending a large amount of data to the server, post has no size limitation, so use post. And sending user input which can contain unknown characters, post is more robust and secure than get. So when you are sending user input to the server which can contain unknown characters, post is more robust and secure than get. So how can you use get? Get requests. A simple get request is like this. So we have seen this. So get the URL is demoget.asp and asynchronous is true xhttp.send. Okay, and if you want to send information with the get method, add the information to the URL. So if you want to send information to the get method, add the information to the URL only. Like do xhttp.open get, and if you want to send information this to demo get to .asp the file URL, and then a question mark, and then whatever information you want to send, like f name is equal to Henry and l name equals to Ford, and true means asynchronous. So okay, and xhttp.send. So like if you want to send this information, we press request data. It is showing hello Henry Ford. Okay. Now let's see post requests. A simple post request is as follows. So like xhttp.open post demo post.asp to xhttp.send. So this is a like simple post request. Okay. But to post data like an HTML form, add an HTTP header with set request header. So to post data like an HTML form, add an HTTP header with set request header. Specify the data you want to use in the send method. So like if you want to use so like the post to post data like an HTML form, add an HTTP header with set request header method and specify the data you want to send in the send method. So xhttp.open post, you give the file name and asynchronous is true. Then you use the set request header. You give content type over here, and then you give application slash if application not, then x www dot slash form dash URL encoded, and then xhttp.send, and whatever information you want to send, you give it as a parameter. Okay, so yeah, hello Henry Ford is here. Okay, so you see get method is a lot easier. Okay, it is very easier, but it is less secure than post. Okay, and there are several reasons why you should use post, and these days everybody use post in their websites only, the post method, because it is more secure. Okay, so for post you have to do like you have to add a header, and then you give content type, so you add a content type header, and then you give application slash x w x slash www dot slash form slash URL encoded. So it is quite complicated, but it is more better than get. I can't say basically better, but it is like more used now. Okay. So set request header, you give the header and the value. It adds the HTTP headers to the request. The header specifies the header name and the value specifies the header value. The URL, a file on a server. So the URL, a file on the server. The URL parameter of the open method is an address to a file on a server. So this is the address to a file on the server. Okay, the file can be any kind of a file like .txt, it can be a text file and an XML file. Okay, or server scripting files like ASP, so like ASP and PHP. Okay, which can perform actions on the server before sending the response back. Okay, so we will learn about ASP, PHP in the next video. Let's continue with this one. Asynchronous true or false, then we will do on-ready state change and then synchronous request. So asynchronous true or false. Server requests should be sent asynchronously. So they should be sent asynchronously. The async parameter of the open method should be set to true. So it should be set to true. So like xhttp.open get ajax.asp true. So it should be set to true. By sending asynchronously, the JavaScript does not have to wait for the server response, but can instead. So if you get false, then the JavaScript will have to wait for the server's response, and then it would do the execution and continue with the program. But asynchronously, you can execute other scripts while waiting for the server response and deal with the response after the response is ready. Okay, but synchronously you will have to wait for the response to come, then you would have to execute other scripts, then you would have to deal with the response after the response is ready. Not after the response is ready, then you will have to deal with the response. So now we are on the on-ready state change property. So always give true over here. Okay, the on-ready state change property with the XML HTTP request object. So with the XML HTTP request object, you can define a function to be executed when the request receives an answer. So you can define a function to be executed when the request receives an answer with the XML HTTP request object. The function is defined in the onReady state change property of the XML HTTP request object. So when the ready state properties value would change, it would call this function and it would go in this function and it would check that if ready state is 4 and status is 200, that means if it is successful, then it would show the response text in any element you want. So you will learn more about on-ready state change in a later chapter. Okay. Now we are on the synchronous request. To execute a synchronous request, change the third parameter in the open method to false. So change the third parameter to false. Sometimes async equals to false are used for quick test. So it is used for quick testing. You will also find synchronous request in older JavaScript code. So in older JavaScript code, you will also find synchronous requests. Okay. Since the code will wait for server completion, there is no need for an onReady state change function. So since the code will wait for server completion, there is no need for an onReady state change function. Okay, because it would wait and then the last one is 4. So like it would, like in load doc, what we are doing, we are creating a new XML HTTP request object, then we are opening the ajaxinfo.txt using the get method, and we are keeping it as synchronous. Okay, then it would send the request, and then after the request is fulfilled by the server and the response is created by the server, the JavaScript is waiting, and after the server has done all the processing and everything, it has given the response text to the to the browser. Then we would print in a demo x http.response text, whatever the response the server has created. Okay, it is very unnoticeable. The difference is very unnoticeable, but there will be a difference. You will see the difference when you create social networking apps and create big apps. Okay. So synchronous XML HTTP request async equals to false is not recommended because the JavaScript will stop executing until the server response is ready. So JavaScript will stop executing until the server response is ready if you do async false. If the server is busy or slow, the application will hang or stop. So if the server is busy or low and you are doing async equals to false, the application will hang or stop. Synchronous XML synchronous XML HTTP request is in the process of being removed from the web standard, but this process can take many years. So the synchronous XML HTTP request is in the process of being removed from the web standard, but this process can take many years. Modern developer tools are encouraged to warn using synchronous request and may throw an invalid access error exception when it occurs. So modern developer tools are encouraged to warn about using synchronous request and may throw an invalid access error exception when it occurs. Okay, so this synchronous thingy would be uh, banned. Okay, it would be removed, but it may take many years. So, and it is very advisable not to use it. Okay, but because it would be removed in future and your program would be crashed in the future. Now we are on the response, so let's take a short break. Ah, guys, this is comfy. Woo. Sorry, guys, I just yawned. Egypt is so interesting. Okay, I will just continue in a minute. Not in a minute. A minute's break is so long. I'm just scrolling through this. Okay, kinda long, but we'll do it. Okay. So the on ready state change property. So the ready state property holds the status of the XML HTTP request. So it holds the status. Okay. The on, I'll just unplug my Mac. Oh, this is hot. Just a second. Okay. So the ready state property holds the status of the XML HTTP request. The onReadyState change property defines a function to be executed when the ready state changes. So the onReadyState change property defines a function to be executed when the ready state changes. The status property and the status text property hold the status of the XML HTTP request object. Okay, property onReadyState change, it defines a function to be called when the ready state property changes. Ready state holds the status of the XML HTTP request. 0 means request not initialized. 1 means server connection established. 2 means request received. 3 means processing the request. And 4 means request finished and response is ready. Status, it holds like 200 is okay, 403 is forbidden, 404 is page not found. Okay. Status text, it returns the status text, for example, okay or not found. So the on ready state change function is called every time the ready state changes. So it is called every time the ready status changes. When ready state is 4 and status is 200, the response is ready. So when ready state is 4, that means when the request is finished and the response is ready and it is successful in doing that, then it means the response is ready and you can do anything with it in JavaScript. So this was our previous load doc example that we have seen many times. So the onReady state change event is triggered 4 times, 1 till 4. One time for each change in the ready state. So one time for each change in the ready state. So if you see, if I allowed this, so every time when it goes in here, if I allowed the ready state, so allowed the ready state, so you will see it would go 4 times. Look, run, change content. What? What? Oh, sorry, this dot ready state, not ready state. This dot ready state. My children. First it is 1, then it is 2, then it is 3, and then it is 4. So that means it shows that it is going in the this function 4 times. Okay. So now we are on using a callback function. A callback function is a function passed as a parameter to another function. So what basically is a callback function? A callback function is a function passed as a parameter to another function. If you have more than one Ajax task in a website, you should create one function for executing the XML HTTP request object and one callback function for each Ajax task. So like here you have load doc. In that you should give it URL and the callback function. Like when it is fulfilled, then what should happen? Okay, and then like this. So like here here we are creating a load doc. It is asking for two things, URL and C function. It is creating a variable xHTTP equals a new XML HTTP request. xHTTP is dot on ready state, so when it would be changed, it would call the function. So when it is everything is successful and the response is ready, it would call C function and it would pass it this. Okay, the value of this. Okay, so whatever the callback function is, it would call that callback function, and it would pass it this. In the callback function, we would handle everything, handle the response that has come, and we will open. First this would happen, so we would open using the get method. We are giving the URL, so whatever file name the user has given, we are giving the URL of it here, and we are giving to asynchronous is true, then we are sending. Okay, and then all this stuff is happening. So let's try it ourselves. So what we are doing, we are creating a load doc. So first we are creating XHTTP to new XML HTTP request object. When we are opening whatever the URL is passed, okay, and asynchronous is true, then we are sending the request to the server. When the ready state is being changed, it is going in here and it checks that when ready state is 4 and this dot status is 200. So when everything, the response is created and everything is successful, the callback function would be called and we will pass it this. Okay. And in my we have it's like here we have a button and whenever it would be clicked we will pass it ajax info.txt. So we would pass load doc ajax info.txt as a URL and the callback function would be my function, and my function over here, in that what we are doing, whatever it is whatever is being passed to this my function, document.getElement by id demo.in.html, it would access demo and set its in HTML to the XHTTP that is being passed and its response text. So it is the same but with a callback function. Okay, so now we are on server response properties. So there are two response properties. One is response text, it gets the response data as a string, and the other is response XML, it gets the response data as XML data. And the server response method, the get response header, it returns specific header information from the server resource. So get response header returns specific header information from the server resource, and get all response headers returns all the header information from the server resource. Okay, so now we will see these all deeply. So the response text property, returns the server response as a JavaScript string. So the response text property returns the server response as a JavaScript string and you can use it accordingly. Okay, so we have used response text a lot of times, so we don't need to see it. Now the response XML property. This is one of the main things. The XML HTTP request object has an inbuilt XML parser. So it has an inbuilt XML parser. The response XML property returns the server response as an XML DOM object. So the response XML property returns the server response as an XML DOM object. Okay, so using this property you can parse the response as an XML DOM object. So using this property you can parse the response as an XML DOM object. So an example is request the file cdcatalog.xml and parse the response. So this is the cdcatalog.xml. In that we have a catalog tag, in that we have a cd tag, in that we have a title, artist, country, company, price and year tag. Okay, so what is happening now in this file? So what is happening, we are creating a variable xhttp xml doc txt x and I. Okay, then we are doing that http is a new xml http request object. Then when the ready state, then we are opening get cdcatalog.xml. So we are opening cdcatalog.xml and asynchronous is true and we send. So whenever the ready state is being changed, we will call the callback function, we will call the function, and in that we will check that if everything is successful, then it will set XML doc to the response XML. So whatever the response XML has come. Okay, then it is setting txt to an empty string. Then it is setting to x. It is setting x to XML doc dot get elements by tag name artist. So whatever tags artist are there in XML doc, all those will come in x. Okay, then it would loop through x. Okay, so like I equals to 0, I less than x dot length, I plus plus, and in txt it is setting txt plus x, and in brackets we are giving I, whatever the value of I is being updated. So I is first 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, and like that, so on. So txt is txt plus, so whatever the txt's value is before, plus xi, so we are passing xi, okay. So 0, then 1, then 2, so like it would bring the first element, then second element, or third element, okay, using this. And then it's child node 0, so its child node is the text node, and dot node value, so its node value is whatever text is there, and then it would add a br, okay. And in the end, we will access demo, and it's in an html we will set to text. So this is the whole text. So all the artists are coming here. So Bob Dylan, Bonnie Tyler, Dolly Parton, okay, and all. So you will learn a lot more about XML DOM in the DOM chapters of this tutorial. Okay. So the get all response headers method. So the get all response headers method returns all header information from the server response. So let's see what happens in this. In this, it brings all the response headers like accept ranges, bytes age, cache control, and there must be like there is a like max age, public content encoding, and so on. So all the response headers are coming. Okay, so the get all response headers function returns all the header information of a resource like length, server type, content type, last modified, etc. Let's find last modified over here. Yeah, so this file was last modified Tuesday 18 July 2017 2017 16 14 29 uh, GMT. So okay, so all the header information is coming in get all response headers property. Then the get response header method. The get response header method returns specific header information from the server response. So like it, if you want to do like we do this dot get response header last modified, so it would bring the last modified information, like the we are accessing the last modified, like that we could access anything. So like here we have the headers. So like if I wanted the like accept ranges, then what would I have done? I would have, instead of last modified, I would have given over here accept ranges. So its value is bytes. It is showing last modified over here because we are showing last modified over here. Okay, so if you don't show this, okay, so its value is bytes. Okay, and we have completed this. So thank you guys. If you like the video, don't forget to smash the like button and share this video with as many people as you can. And if you have not subscribed to my channel yet, kindly do it so that you don't miss any of my videos. Thank you guys. Bye. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep watching my videos. Dad.